The nervous system, the brain, spinal cord, and nerves, is a living communications network, carrying various kinds of messages to and from the different parts of your body. The nervous system is composed of nerve fibers that conduct information into your spinal cord and brain, and the other nerve fibers that send information out to different parts of your body. The cells that make up the various parts of the nervous system are called neurons. Each neuron has a neuron body, a part of the cell which contains a nucleus and other structures. But a typical neuron has two other kinds of structures: long fibers that extend in different directions from the body of the cell. These fibers are often wrapped with a fatty substance called myelin. Fibers that carry impulses toward the neuron body are called dendrites. Fibers that carry impulses away are called axons. Different structures are concentrated in different parts of the body. Some neuron bodies are bound into clusters called ganglia. They are often associated with your spinal cord. The spinal cord is a long cylinder of nerve tissue that passes through the hollow channels of bones called the vertebrae. The spinal cord is protected by those vertebrae. It is also protected by three membranes called meninges. Running through the center of the spinal cord is a narrow channel filled with fluid. This central canal connects to cavities in the brain that contain more of the same fluid. Around the central canal is a core made of thousands of neuron bodies. This tissue is called gray matter because of its color. Sensory information from the body is fed through ganglia into the spinal cord. Surrounding the gray matter is a concentration of axon fibers. Such tissue is called white matter. White matter gets its color from myelin sheaths that surround the bundles. White matter is also found in the inner layers of the brain. What exactly is a nerve impulse?
A nerve impulse is a complex electrochemical event. The negative charge that's normally at rest on the inside of the membrane will become positive when sodium comes from the outside of the cell to the inside. That generates a local electrical event. That same phenomena then spreads down the length of the nerve, thereby creating the nerve impulse. Finally, when the impulse gets to the end of the nerve, the nerve will release a chemical, and that chemical will incite a similar change in the next nerve.
The electrical nature of this process is the result of the movement of ions. When a stimulus occurs, a change takes place at one point on a fiber's membrane. Now, positive sodium ions enter the fiber, reversing the polarity of the fiber at that point. Almost immediately, potassium ions exit, and the outside at that point is again positive with respect to the inside. So the polarity reverses. Then the sodium ions that entered are pumped out of the cell and replaced by potassium inside, and the resting state of the neuron is restored. These changes trigger a similar reversal of polarity around the next part of the cell membrane, creating a wave of depolarization and repolarization. The changes ripple along the neuron fiber, area by area, creating the moving event that we call an action potential. The action potential travels to the end of the axon, and then the information is passed to the dendrites of the adjacent cells. Impulses never travel in the opposite direction. When axons or dendrites are damaged, they can usually regenerate. But the nerve cell is so specialized that it has lost the power to reproduce itself. Once the cell body dies, no other nerve cell will take its place. Other roots must be developed. Physical therapy offers one way of repairing or adjusting to nerve damage.
When a nerve gets severed, its ability to heal has a great deal to do with what its status was before the injury. A healthy nerve before an injury is much better able to recover. Once a nerve gets injured, the extent of the injury is critical. If the surrounding tissue remains intact so that the nerve has a pathway with which to regenerate, it can often improve substantially. Therapy is important because what it allows you to do is to maximize the degree of function of those nerve fibers that were undamaged.
Physical therapy in a nerve injury, its primary role is to help guide the regeneration of the nerve. As the nerve regenerates, the pathway between the injury site and the brain has to reform. With physical therapy, you can, through exercise and repetition, help form that pathway so that when the patient thinks about moving the injured area, the movement occurs.
Once the neurons regain their ability to carry an action potential, messages can be transmitted again. The speed of an action potential depends on two things. One is the thickness of a neuron fiber. An impulse travels faster down a thick fiber, but it travels more slowly down a thin one. Speed also depends on the presence of a myelin sheath. An impulse is faster down sheathed membranes and slower down an unsheathed one. We've seen how an impulse passes down a neuron fiber, but neurons use a different mechanism to pass information from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of another. Now the message must cross a tiny gap between nerve cells, about 1/1000th of a millimeter across, called a synapse. It is too large a distance for an action potential to cross. Instead, the gap is crossed by a class of chemicals called neurotransmitters, released by structures called synaptic vesicles. Neurotransmitters lock onto receptors on the next neuron's dendrites. Then a new action potential begins, traveling down the next neuron. Now enzymes clean up by destroying the neurotransmitters, and the neuron is ready to be stimulated again.
There are neurotransmitters which can carry an impulse, and they can also block an impulse. One of the classifications for blocking an impulse is for pain. The body has its own blocking agents, which are called endorphins and enkephalins, but in addition to this, for severe pain, there is also medications. One of the groups is called opiates. This can block pain when a patient's pain is more severe. The side effects with this, though, also include respiratory depression. With this respiratory depression, a physician or other health professional needs to use another group of drugs which would also block this side effect. It needs to be given in a very short period of time because the effects of respiratory depression are very severe.
Taste, smell, touch, vision, hearing. These senses put you in contact with the outside world. Specialized cells, called receptors, respond to external stimuli by launching an action potential. You can feel the texture of an object because its pressure stimulates receptors in your fingertips. They launch action potentials down the dendrites of sensory neurons, which travel along 3 kinds of pathways through your nervous system. One pathway is called a reflex loop. Suppose you touch something hot. Heat receptors respond immediately, sending an action potential along a dendrite of a sensory cell to its nearby cell body within a ganglion. Then it travels out an axon to the spinal cord, where it connects with an interneuron in the gray matter. The interneuron conducts the impulse to another cell in the gray matter. This is a motor neuron, which sends an action potential outward toward a muscle, which can move your hand. The motor neuron releases a neurotransmitter chemical, which stimulates the muscle to pull your hand away from the heat. This reflex loop can respond quickly, without taking time to consult your brain. A similar pathway is connected to your eyelid muscles. You blink reflexively without thinking about it if dust gets in your eye. A second kind of pathway leads directly to the brain. At the back of your eyes, for example, cranial nerves transmit information about what you see directly to the brain. Your senses of hearing, taste, and smell all have direct pathways along cranial nerves to the brain. But most impulses travel along a third kind of pathway, in which action potentials pass along nerve fibers to the spinal cord. Then interneurons conduct them up the spine to the gateway to the brain. This region is called the medulla oblongata. The medulla is part of a section of the brain called the brain stem. The brain stem directs impulses to other parts of the brain. Above the brain stem, the cerebellum regulates many kinds of activities that do not require conscious thought. Thought takes place in the cerebrum, a thin layer of gray matter, only a few millimeters thick. It is divided by a deep groove into two connected halves, or hemispheres. Many bundles of white matter join the two halves of the brain together. The brain is made up of white matter and gray matter, like the spinal cord. But here, their positions are reversed. Gray matter is on the outside, white matter is on the inside. The bundles of nerve fibers that form the white matter make up the main mass of the brain. Around this is the thin layer of neurons that forms the gray matter. The surface of the gray matter is folded and wrinkled. These convolutions give it a much larger surface area than it would have if it were smooth. All of your thoughts and voluntary actions originate in the gray matter of your cerebrum. It's not the number of cells in your brain that makes you intelligent. Instead, it's the number of connections your brain makes between the pathways of your nervous system. After processing the impulses it receives, the brain sends new messages outward. With these impulses, your conscious mind controls how you move and respond to the environment around you. Of course, you don't consciously digest your food or command the operation of your glands and organs. These operations are governed by other pathways in your nervous system, called autonomic pathways. They carry impulses that regulate your heartbeat. They carry commands that govern the activities of your stomach. These are just a few of the activities controlled by your autonomic nervous system. Most autonomic commands come from the cerebellum and related regions of the brain. These regions monitor the balance of chemicals in your blood. They stimulate activity in the parathyroid glands. They signal the pituitary gland to send out hormones that regulate your kidneys. And when your brain senses danger, they signal the adrenal glands to speed up your heartbeat. Your glands and organs are all regulated by autonomic pathways, which help maintain homeostasis, a state of internal balance. So we say that the nervous system is a living communication system. It carries information along neural fibers by means of electrochemical impulses. These impulses help govern how your body moves and responds to the world around you.